Okay, so let's start back when we then talk about the rabbinic period, this first period of what we would think of as the actual religion of Judaism. Uh, Judaism is a religion that very much focuses on written scripture, on the written word. And so, what are the basic writings that Jews consider sacred? So, of course, in Jamnia we see the final combination of the books that become our Old Testament, their Hebrew Bible. We call it the Tanakh, as you can see. That has become a sort of an acronym for this, the Law, the Prophets, and the Writings. This is the oldest ordering. It is the Jewish ordering. And it is also the way we know that it came into written form. So this is the oldest, and in many ways, this is the most recent in terms of being written. And particularly the Bible, but particularly the Torah, the law, becomes the foundation of modern Judaism, but not directly from the biblical standpoint. So what else do we see in terms of literature from this period? We get then a series of the Targumim, are translations of the Hebrew Bible into Aramaic. Hebrew had not been spoken as a common language since the Persian period. So we have all of these wonderful Targum. The singular is Targumim, the I am is the plural, and we see them starting around the 1st century. This was one of the more famous ones, the Targum Jonathan, but you can see the creativity that they use to interpret the scripture as they translate. So technically they are translations, but they are very loose, very interpretive translations. So at the beginning, the Lord created the heavens and the earth. It was vacancy and desolation, solitary of the sons of men, void of every animal, and darkness was upon the face of the abyss. And the spirit of mercies, isn't that lovely, from before the Lord breathed upon the face of the waters. So the Targumim are great writings that are still used to sort of understand Judaism in this period. They are Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Bible, but obviously very loose. But then as we go through the rabbinic period, which is this early period of Judaism, we get the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is so very, very important. So the idea of the oral law you may remember from 125 or from a New Testament class that there were a group of Jews known as the Pharisees. So remember, it is the Pharisees who are in many ways the founders of modern Judaism. They believed that there was obviously the written Torah, the written law, and that's what became the Bible. But they also believed that alongside that, Moses received other law and other knowledge that was passed down or transmitted orally through the leaders and the rabbis and teachers of Judaism. And so that is what the oral law is. So you may be familiar again from from Introduction to Christianity. The oral law. Eventually, this oral law, this oral tradition, is written down, and that is what the Mishnah is. It takes on its form in the 3rd century as Judaism begins to develop as a non-temple, non-sacrificial religion. So what does it mean to be a Jew as opposed to being a Yahwist or a person who practiced biblical Judaism? It's not about sacrifice. It is about following the law. And so this oral law is an expansion of the understanding of what that means. And it is fundamentally where we get Jewish legal theory. How do we think through? In the broadest sense, the laws of Torah were written in an agricultural society that, for us, from our perspective, is 3,000 years old. How do we, in any time or place, interpret that law for our own lives. That's the fundamental question of modern traditional Judaism anyway. And so this idea of Jewish legal theory, which is really very much a conversation between, rather than just the laying down of law. This is it. So here is just an example. So they set this up for PowerPoint, so I've got multiple slides. But here's the question. This is how much of the Mishnah starts. From what time can the Shema be read in the evening? So the law in the Hebrew Bible is that one must do these devotions, say the Shema, in the evening. So what does that mean, right? How does one follow the law? So from the time when the priests enter to eat their heave offering until the first watch. This makes no sense in the modern context, right? Because there's no temple, so there's no heave offering, right? So these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. We quote the scripture. But what does that mean if you don't have a temple anymore? So Rabbi Eliezer points out the original law. Then it says, and the sages. So just this group of people until midnight. Okay, well that makes sense. If you're supposed to do it in the evening, then midnight is a good time. You have to do it before midnight. Okay, so we've got Eliezer, we've got the sages, then we have Rabban Gamaliel, one of the greatest. And he says, until dawn, until the pillar of dawn rises. And then he goes into a story, right? Why? Well, it once happened that his children returned from a feast and they were at the party and they were off doing something legitimate, but they didn't get home in time to say the Shema before midnight, before they went to bed. So it says, if it is not yet dawn, you are obligated to recite it. You can't come home and say, oh, it's after midnight, I don't have to say it. No, he said to them, and not only this, but in all places where the sages have said until midnight. So wait a minute. So let's see. We start the rule then. We've got the rule that it has to be said until you have to say the Shema as long as the dawn hasn't broken yet. So the original law is it has to be said at night. Okay, the heave offering, but that doesn't mean anything to us anymore. So we say until midnight. But Gamaliel says, wait a minute, what happens if you come home after midnight? Are you no longer required to do it? And the answer is no, of course you're still required to do it. So you have to do it as long as the dawn has not yet broken, you're allowed to do it. Okay, solve that problem. Oh, and by the way, every place where it says until midnight, that means until dawn. So you get the expansion of the law. This is a classic Jewish legal reasoning. And then says until midnight, and the burning of fats and limbs, anything the commandment applies that says until midnight must be the dawn. Anything that must be eaten within one day, etc. So they're bringing up other references to other laws. If that is so, then why did the sages say until midnight? In order to keep a person farther from transgression. So it's a fascinating insight into the way that they then take these ancient laws and apply them into new situations, right? So then for those of you who may never have heard of the Mishnah, you may have heard of the Talmud. Second only to the Bible, the Talmud is the most important writing in Judaism. These are people of the written word. So the Talmud then, when the Mishnah is written, then all sorts of commentary begins to rise around it. And the most important one of them, one of the oldest ones, is known as the Gemara. So the Talmud then is the combination of the Mishnah and the Gemara. And so we've got two. We've got the legal material, the halakha, and depending on what branch of Judaism you follow today, this legal material in the Talmud is your defining for your life and how you live and how you follow the law. But then there's also a lot of other stuff, wisdom material, great little stories and things like that. So it's a very diverse and it's a lot of writing. There are two forms of it, the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud, and it is the Babylonian Talmud that has become the most authoritative version of the Talmud for Jews, but there are two. So let's just go to this particular photograph that I have placed up here. So you've got whatever color that is, sort of a peach. This, if you were to sit down to do Talmud studies with a Jew today, you would have a book that looks like this in front of you. So this is open to a random page. This is the Mishnah. This is the Gemara. But you very rarely see the Talmud with just those two parts in modern context. This then is further commentary. This is the commentary of one of the most important medieval scholars of Judaism, Rashi. This then, so you've got the Mishnah, the Gemara, and then literally written around it is Rashi's commentary on the Mishnah. Then you have in this aquamarine further sort of a variety of commentaries that have been cobbled together. So think of these as notes. And then ultimately you have here in this being sort of cross-referencing. So when you open the page to study the Talmud, you are literally opening it up to a conversation. You've got the original. You've got, from the 300s. You've got the Gemara that develops from the 300s to the 600s. You've got medieval commentary. Then you've got at least smatterings of all sorts of other commentaries on each verse that have been considered important, and then of course sort of these are guides to how to cross-referencing the various verses that are used in the legal arguments. So this is, for centuries, this is what it means to be Jewish, is to go to synagogue and study the Talmud.